Welcome to Julie Noted. This week, the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who also served as the chair of the Federal Reserve, is visiting Beijing in order to, as she says, ease tensions between the United States and China. Now, just a few weeks ago, our Secretary of State Antony Blinken also visited Beijing, also to ease tensions between the United States and China. Secretary Blinken was actually the first Secretary of State to visit Beijing since 2018. So on the surface, it seems like this is a very consequential meeting between Secretary Yellen and top Chinese officials. The little secret, though, is that when there are these meetings between two top diplomats of countries that do a lot of business with one another, we actually don't know very much about what they discussed. Governments tend to make mealy-mouthed statements about the supposed progress of the meetings, and this is no different. For instance, both governments, that is the United States and China, said that the talks are, quote, going well. Wow, that tells us a lot. The one specific thing they did say is that China has not agreed over the United States' proposal to restrict technology exports from China. That is no shocker. China obviously does not want to put itself in a position where they will not be getting American business. What we do know, even if we don't know a lot about the diplomatic agreements that have happened, what we do know, or what we are able to analyze about these meetings, are the optics of them. Now, sometimes we in the United States underestimate the power of optics. By optics, I mean posture, handshake, certain kind of gestural or symbolic motions that indicate the interpersonal or diplomatic relations between leaders. We in the United States tend not to think of those as particularly important. Well, our adversaries over in China view things the exact opposite. Deference to leaders, your body language, the way that you physically interact with someone says a great deal about the relationship that you have with that person. So right now, I'm going to analyze a little faux pas. Actually, I shouldn't even say a little faux pas, a pretty big faux pas that our Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, made in this visit to Beijing. Secretary Yellen actually bowed 3 times in the presence of a top Chinese premier. To boot, she actually then, in saying that she was happy to be meeting with this person, got the name wrong of the vice premier. This is Vice Premier He, and she called him Vice Premier Hu. Let's look right now at the video of Secretary Yellen bowing to this Chinese official. So we see here, they're shaking hands, and she bows 3 times, bam, 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 one after the other. She actually keeps doing it. It looks like it may have happened a 4th or a 5th time. And then we see that lady on the side there kind of run over to Secretary Yellen. We're not sure who that individual is, but it seems like she's trying to grab Secretary Yellen's arm and tell her, stop bowing to our adversaries. Stop bowing to this official who, like almost all, I would say all, Chinese Communist Party officials, tries to undermine the United States, okay? So again, here in the United States, we wouldn't see that as potentially a big deal. But bowing in China and in other Asian countries is a sign of deference. Now, one may say, well, deference might be a good thing, a respectful thing, when one leader is meeting with another leader. It's not that we, the United States, want to show China disrespect, but we certainly don't want to show them deference. Deference means that you are kind of surrendering to the other person, acknowledging that they have a higher stature or place than you do. When we have a top diplomatic official from the United States meeting with our biggest adversary, the last thing we want to be doing is showing a sign of deference. We want to show strength and valor and determination, especially out of all countries with China. A former White House staffer, Bradley Blakeman, who served under President George W. Bush, commented on this bowing, and he said, "Never, ever, ever. An American official does not bow." He continued, "It looks like she's been summoned to the principal office, and that is exactly the kind of optics that the Chinese love. We right now, the United States, are in a particularly adversarial and precarious situation with China. China has been unbelievably contentious with their rhetoric and with their dealings towards the United States. May I offer a few examples? Earlier this year, they sent over a spy balloon which traversed the United States in order to spy on some of our main military bases. Then, on top of that, they actually opened an actual permanent spy base on the neighboring country of Cuba so that they are able to spy on, among other places, Miami, Florida, which has a lot of military bases. They also spy on us every day. They spy on 120 million Americans through Beijing CCP-backed companies like TikTok and WeChat. TikTok, if you read their terms of service, when you sign up for TikTok, you are handing over your personal information, your financial information. You are giving the CCP-backed company the right to track your photos, the right to look at messages that you send, even messages you don't send. I read the TikTok terms of service. Anything that you type, they are allowed to keep. They are also allowed through TikTok to be able to have access to your computer files and contents. That is a blatant violation of Americans' privacy. That is a blatant, adversarial, aggressive move by one of our top adversaries to undermine and put at risk citizens of the United States. But here we have Secretary Janet Yellen bowing, not once, not twice, but 3 and possibly 4 or 5 times to the people who are in charge of doing this to our country. Shall I go on? How about the fentanyl issue that we see here in the United States? Fentanyl is the #1 cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45. Where does the fentanyl come from? It is made and manufactured in China, and then it is sent over to Mexican drug cartels. It is sold to Mexican drug cartels, and then they funnel it across our southern border. That is an act of warfare. What China, and it's their eerily brilliant strategy, what they are doing is that they are killing American citizens, but they're doing it in a backdoor, clandestine, covert way. They may not be sending in planes or warships or landing battalions on our soil, but they are nevertheless killing American citizens. And as I said, that is an act of warfare. On top of that, in a total instance of gaslighting, China has accused the United States of being adversarial towards China. Xi Jinping said at the 20th Party Congress back in October of 2022 that the United States is engaging in, quote, all-out encirclement and containment against China. He and many of his top officials also said that if the United States does not change course, there will surely be, quote, conflict and confrontation. In this most recent meeting with Secretary Yellen, a top Chinese official said 3 feet of ice cannot be dissolved with one visit. So here we have, in almost every way possible, China trying to undermine us, spying on us, indeed killing American citizens. They steal billions of dollars in our intellectual property. They send over students and workers to come into American society and take American ways of life and bring it back to China. Here we have China totally eating our lunch, as our president once denied China's doing. President Biden said, China's eating our lunch. Come on, man. That's ridiculous. They are eating our lunch. And yet, they are the ones telling us that we are being icy and that we have to stop our encirclement lest there be any conflict. And then again, on top of that, we are bowing to them. What we should be doing is having a very firm stance, not just in our rhetoric and our policy, but certainly in our body language. We should be conveying to China that we have been unbelievably generous to them. We offer more student visas to Chinese students than any country on earth. South Korea is number 2. We offer about 300,000 Chinese students student visas here in the United States. South Korea, the number 2 country, offers less than half of that, about 120,000 student visas for Chinese pupils. We've been incredibly generous in other ways. How about in 1979, when then President Carter acknowledged the People's Republic of China and not Taiwan, and the nationalist government run by Chiang Kai-shek as the legitimate government of China. And in doing that back in 1979, what we did is we gave the seat at the UN to China. That China seat actually used to be held by the people who run Taiwan. But by acknowledging the PRC as the legitimate government of China, we handed over that United Nations seat to them. Also, in the early 2000s, under President George W. Bush, we admitted China to the World Trade Organization, giving them a lot of access to international trade and a say over the rules that should govern trade. And of course, perhaps the most generous thing of all that we have done is put a president into office, that is President Biden, who is bought off by China. According to the Hunter Biden laptop story, there are several emails between Hunter Biden and his business partners, and they're between Hunter Biden and his business partners and a top Chinese energy tycoon, Ye Jianming, in which they are talking about this Chinese energy tycoon paying off the Biden family in order to favorably influence policy. And in one of those emails, it said that 10% of that money will go to, quote, the big guy, which is our own President Joe Biden. But yet again, as I have said repeatedly, we are the one flying over to Beijing and bowing to them. How does that make any sense at all? Thanks for joining me today. Just as a reminder to hit the subscribe button down below so that you can stay notified every time I post a duly noted news video or a timeless episode. Take care. I'll see you soon.